News team, assemble!
It's back and bigger than ever. It's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and Bob.
All right, welcome back. It is the unofficial 40 podcast right here on Soonerscoop.com. We've got the entire gang with us today. We've got banging going on probably in the background at some part. The construction has started again. We got, Josh, I know, like your brother, doesn't he do construction or something? Your brother-in-law or something like that?
Yeah, my brother does all sorts of remodels and that kind of stuff, yeah.
Does he ever talk about how permits suck?
Yes. He is very much down with the man. I guess not down with the man.
The man is against him. The man's keeping him down.
Yes.
Is what you mean.
Exactly. Pretty much all the time.
So we've gotten everything. It took about 3 weeks to get all the permit situation, which is good. I mean, I'll say this. You don't want, like, if I need to know that other people are renovating near us, I don't want it. I want to know it's not a massive fire hazard. So I'm okay with the time that it takes to get it all straightened out. But they are back to work today on the new studio, and hopefully it'll be done pretty, not by the end of spring football, but shortly thereafter. And we're going to need them because there's all kinds of stuff going on. We've been out to practice 3 times now. We got to go out yesterday, and it was the worst viewing of all, the times that we've been. There really wasn't a whole lot to see. It was, you did get to see some one-on-one stuff that was good. And by the way, George, excellent camera work. You and Bob both. You did excellent job.
I'm working at it.
Not that Eddie's not doing an excellent job. I don't want it to make it out like this is a competition.
That's debatable. No, Eddie's been killing it. But, it was I like going out to practice. I know that sometimes we walk away and say, oh, that was a waste of time, or there wasn't a whole lot to see. But there's always something. And I thought...
It's kind of like last week when we were talking about it's just good being able to go into a studio or going into a radio show or wherever and be able to talk about something that you actually saw rather than second
word
or
of mouth
hand
stuff.
accounts.
Well, and even just, looking at the guys and like even small things, like I noticed Nick Anderson was actually practicing yesterday. He hadn't been practicing a whole lot, things like that. I thought it was cool to see J.J. Hester make the catch of the day on the one-on-one stuff,
Great catch.
Might have been out of bounds.
I think he might have been out of bounds with his footwork, but that's okay. It was a one-handed grab.
It was a nice grab. I thought Kip Lewis looked really good in the one-on-one stuff. Good. There's small things here and there. Yeah, we didn't get
Bauer
to
Sharp
90
looked
minutes,
excellent.
But yeah, Bauer.
I think Bauer Sharp's he is emerging maybe possibly as a guy that you didn't know what you had going in, that I now expect to basically line up from day one as tight end 1A or 1B.
Yeah.
I'm buying stock in Caden Helms, by the way. The way that Brent talked about him yesterday, unprompted, just getting him out there, I know is a feat in and of itself here over the first year and a half since he's been in Norman, but physically, and we talked about this last week, physically, he looks like a guy. Josh, you've talked about him in terms of what you saw of him coming out of high school. They just got to keep him healthy. If they can keep him healthy and keep him on the field, I think he's going to be a guy that can catch some passes this next year.
Other than Devon Mitchell, who's by far the best looking tight end they have, Caden Helms, I think, is number 2.
Yeah.
In terms of guys that just look impressive.
And
I would say you have
obviously got to play.
You have to kind of parse that statement that you just made, because when you say Devon Mitchell looks great, you're not saying that he looks like a fantastic tight end that's runs routes and blocks well. Like, he's still a baby.
When you say Devon Mitchell, I think anything that comes after it's with the known that he should be a junior in high school right now.
Yeah. It's kind of like PJ last year. We'd go out to practice and be like, man, PJ just looks the part, but you could tell he's still getting his legs underneath him. He's still trying to figure out how to play at this level, especially the physicality. It's not like a
baby giraffe situation, but maybe it's a little bit of newborn stuff. I'll tell you this, the guy that has really stood out to me of the babies, the freshman, I think Nigel Smith's further along than we thought he would be.
He looks great. I love the single-digit number 2.
Yeah. Here's the other one I'll throw at you as a young guy that I think is going to maybe play some. Jaden Hardy. that is a guy that we consistently see pop up making some plays. And then Brent yesterday couldn't remember
what was
his
the confusion
name.
there.
I don't know. I think he was.
But when you go over the entire roster like Brent did yesterday.
Maybe it's a Zion Kearney, Jaden Hardy kind of thing.
Yes.
One offense, one defense.
But him talking about how he can play any position in the secondary, and then also knowing that behind the scenes he's been getting some run with the ones. And some of that's because Billy Bowman's been out. I think Peyton Bowen has been a little nicked up at times. Like, they've had some guys, I think they're still kind of slow playing Robert Spears-Jennings. And so I think that that's part of it, but clearly he's a smart guy that they trust to kind of do whatever they want him to do. Same with Eli Bowen. Eli Bowen was another guy.
Yeah, he looks good. I mean, from what you see, and we've heard Woody Washington, brag on him quite a bit. I will say, there was one rep yesterday that I was like, okay, well, as much as we like him, I can see why he still hasn't broken through, and that was Jacoby Johnson a little bit. And it's just very limited rep, so it's not really fair.
His that one rep, I think he got beat by Jaden Gibson, and Jaden Gibson beats him right off the ball and kind of pushes him to the side. But his closing speed on that play, Jacoby Johnson, if you go watch that,
he was wide open, yeah.
And Jacoby almost makes a play on the ball. You can see why they really like him. I think that it's just it's a learning thing, and he's got to get more experience out there.
And we really haven't seen, a lot from, the running backs to really judge in person. We did see Samuel Omosigo with an interception in the scrimmage that looked impressive that they put on their Twitter page.
Yeah, I like Omosigo. I like Lewis Carter. I don't know how they get him on the field, but they've got to find a role for that dude because he's just a missile. And I think that he's somebody that's just itching to get on the field. I don't know where it is because I still like Kip Lewis. I like Danny Stutzman.
And Kip looked great in one-on-ones yesterday.
I still believe in Jaron Kanik and Kobe McKenzie, but you wonder, can Lewis Carter find a role on the field in some capacity?
How about, just a little bit that we've seen, but I'm sure this is something that everybody's interested in. Tyler Keltner, the transfer from Florida State at kicker.
He's been good, and no one's going to want to hear what I'm about to say next, but I think Zach Schmidt has been really good, too, in practice.
Look, here's one thing. We know that Zach Smith has a talented leg. Schmidt. I'll learn that when he starts making more kicks, I guess.
Yeah, fair.
But Zach Schmidt, maybe there is something to be said about competition. I mean, maybe there is something to be said about being pushed because I'm telling you, Josh, you can think back, go back to Garrett Hartley, even Austin Seibert a little bit. Like when guys got comfortable and were multi-year kickers, you would see them sometimes just go off of a cliff and just all of a sudden they weren't the same kicker anymore. Competition's really important for those guys.
There's no question. I mean, you look at those guys and you bring up a good point because it almost feels like a pattern for Oklahoma guys through the years where you look at
Trey
as a sophomore, he was incredible. Junior, yeah. Trey DeCarlo. I mean, Trey DeCarlo, at one point, you're like, well, he's going to win a Groza here at some point. He was so good for a stretch there. And then, it wasn't like he became bad. He just wasn't the same guy, wasn't as sharp. And maybe some of that's just mental, but maybe it's easier to kind of stay sharp when someone's kind of clipping at your heels all the time.
I think the biggest example of that is probably Jimmy Stevens. There was no one else to kick. He was all there was. And as bad as he was, they had no options. And he just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, I think the kicking competition...
His attitude didn't help him.
Is definitely going to help Schmidt, but I don't know. I mean, both of them were good from about 49, 50 yards yesterday in practice. I mean, just nailed it, both of them. So, I don't know.
There's this...
They're kicking inside. I don't really care.
That's my thing.
They're going to everybody makes kicks in practice. I need to see a guy make a kick when the game's on the line, and hopefully you don't get put into that position. But you need to go make kicks when the lights are on, and I think that's going to be the biggest question mark. You can know if an offensive line or defensive line how they're going to play or what they're expected to be. I think with Zach Schmidt, you go back to last year. I think a lot of it was between the ears, and for kickers, that's a big problem.
I also think too, if Schmidt ends up being the starting kicker, his leash is so much shorter than it was last year. There was no leash because they had literally no one else.
Just having somebody else in the room, a new set of eyeballs, and Doug Deacon, I think is going to help everybody. It's almost like a little bit of a blank slate or a fresh start. And I think that, he's going to put out the best kicker out there that gives him the best opportunity. I think last year, especially when Zach got into the troubles that he did, they just didn't have any other options. Kind of like what you said, Gary. I think that, Gavin Marshall wanted to be out there. He couldn't, though. And I think that the way that they practice day in and day out, I find that to be interesting, just the way that, Jay Nunez did it as opposed to what Doug Deacon does. And I think that he has a little bit of a track record, that he knows how to run a special teams unit. And it'll be interesting to see if they're kicking every day and that kind of stuff.
I would love for them at the spring game at halftime just have a kicking competition. Just
That'd
say,
be
all right,
awesome.
Here you go.
That would be the most important thing that came out of the spring game.
And have tell the fans to just boo them during it. Just get them.
Well, they might be booing them anyways. You might have to tell them with the way that OU kicked the ball last year.
That's true. But
yeah, that might be considered harassment, like public harassment for Zach Schmidt.
Good. Probably needs it.
So I was thinking about just other guys among on that list, but there's just so many things that we haven't seen because we haven't seen team. Like I don't know how Deion Burks looks right now, and I don't know how often the quarterbacks can even get the ball out to receivers.
Yeah, sure.
With the offensive line, and we've glossed over probably the biggest news of yesterday, which was we did find out about Troy Everett, and he was out there wearing a big brace on his knee.
Scheduled to have surgery today.
But, George, you wrote the story after it was over. Just give us the latest there with Everett.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a knee injury. Not exactly sure what type. I would assume that he didn't tear his ACL, because if he did, he would be out longer than what Brent said, which, Brent said that, hoping for the end of fall camp, which tells you that, and the fact that he's having surgery, he probably tore something in there. I don't know exactly the severity of it, but
the end of camp, though, that's good news. And we're talking about the end of August camp. It's not an injury if he were to get through rehabilitation. And, Bob brought this up this morning. They've had some situations where you just can't trust that somebody's going to be back. See Javonte Barnes, see Andrell Anthony a little bit, like we talked about last week on the podcast. You would hope, though, that all things considered, it's good news that it's not he's going to be lost for the 2024 season.
Yeah, I mean, if it was an ACL, he wouldn't be able to play next year. So
Can I
that's
do
good
some
news.
Google doctoring?
Sure.
If Google doctoring is correct, he might have damaged the medial patellofemoral ligament. I'd never even heard of that before.
Sure. I mean, I'm no doctor. I also don't exactly know what the injury was. There's been some speculation on what exactly it was, but I don't know for sure what exactly happened. But I think the bottom line is OU was already thin at center. Josh Bates has not, I would say, lived up to what people had hoped. I mean, I think there's still a hope that he can grow and progress, but they need to go out and look in the portal and see if they can't find at least somebody that's a veteran that can come in and maybe help them out there.
Yeah, and look, we'll come back to this as far as the offensive line overall, because I do want to get to just a few more impressions. I will say this, like, from what I'm kind of gathering and what Brent talked about yesterday, it's interesting the way that he talks about Casey Thompson, because it seems like Casey is a guy that he's almost like an assistant coach more than he's a quarterback. It sounds like they're using this spring to give a lot more reps to the young guys than they are Casey. Did it come off that way to you?
Yes. I think that
he can't take any reps.
Yeah.
Oh, because he's coming back from the injury.
But I do think though Kerry has a point in the sense that, like, yeah, Casey's like another assistant out there. He's obviously a veteran guy in a room that is really young. I mean, I think we sometimes forget that Jackson Arnold's he's not even 21 yet. And then you add Michael Hawkins, who sounds like he's having a really good spring. I do think that having Casey out there, somebody that's played in so many different offenses, be able to kind of talk to those guys is certainly a help. I just don't know. I mean, I have no idea if he's the way Michael Hawkins has been talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if he ends up being the backup quarterback over Casey.
And again, I mean, every time that I've seen him do anything, he's looked good. But, how he's done in the scrimmages, what his completion percentage has been, what his touchdowns have been. We have a very active YouTube commenter that comments on everything Michael Hawkins. I don't know who it is exactly. But, it's one of those things like he's going to get his chance. If he's this good, he's not going to just be sat on the bench to rot. I mean,
well, it depends on how good Jackson Arnold is. I mean, Jackson Arnold's as good as we think he is, then there's a good chance that we don't see Michael Hawkins playing for Oklahoma until 2026.
Well, if with the level of athlete that Hawkins is, do you put some, almost like last year when we saw them do that stuff for Jackson Arnold and you're like, why are you guys doing this? You're forcing something that's not there. Michael Hawkins is that level of runner. Okay, you're not wasting snaps to put the ball in his hand and let him do some zone read stuff.
But don't you think he's a good enough thrower to where he can operate an offense that is primarily built on throwing the football?
Yeah, I just mean if you wanted to say, okay, we're going to have this element where we're going to have some QB run game and not put Jackson Arnold at risk, I think you could walk that line pretty nicely with Michael Hawkins because you're right, Kerry. He has the ability to beat you with his arm if you're not, if you're cheating too much, if your safeties are coming up. He can do some things to cause you real trouble. But at the same time, you do have to respect his ability as a runner because it's not even close. He's the most dynamic runner Oklahoma has by a mile right now at quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think outside of the Belldozer, I've never been a fan of any kind of dual quarterback thing. It's never, to me, it's and especially with Jackson Arnold, to say that he can't do things in the run game, he obviously can. I mean,
I don't think he's saying. I think it's more about keeping him healthy. I mean, I think that's how important Jackson is to the offense overall.
But I think we know part of his game is going to be pulling it down. I mean, we saw that in the Alamo Bowl.
Right. But at the same time, I agree with you, Kerry. I think that if you're having to put in Michael Hawkins to run packages, and there's particular games that maybe you do that. If you feel like it gives you a better option of moving the football. If they can't turn around and run the football, that's a bigger problem than anything else.
Especially with those backs we're looking at right now.
That's what the Belldozer was a product of, is they couldn't run the ball inside the 10-yard line.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we've seen some things. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've seen some things out of Javonte Barnes that kind of signals he looks better.
Oh, he definitely looks better. I mean, I think he definitely looks a little bit more
for the
explosive.
running back stuff. It's just so hard to be able to tell, and especially even putting it or coming out of scrimmages and stuff. It's hard to tell because I need to see it when the lights turn on. There's a lot of these questions that will be answered.
Well, is this offensive line going to block well enough for him to showcase what he does?
I do think the offensive line is better interior than it was a year, or it has the potential to be better interiorly than it did a year ago.
There's a couple things. We get back, I want to talk about the offensive line, but I also want to single out what was said about David Stone yesterday, because apparently we didn't realize that David Stone had the vision that he has, and maybe thought of him as a little bit of a 5-star prima donna. But apparently that's not the case, and we'll talk about that. But Eddie's another man. I think there's a little prima donna in Eddie, but he has great vision.
That's because I'm an exceptional person. And you know who else is exceptional? Enjoy Vision. They're the best laser vision center in Oklahoma City. It's not even close. The combination of mind-blowing technology, experienced eyeball surgeon, and exceptional patient care was life-changing for me. What they're doing for the unofficial 40 listener, they're giving $400 off of LASIK. Ever heard of it? All you got to go to is enjoywithme.com. That is the letter NJOY withme.com. Use promo code U40, $400 off for LASIK. Enjoy Vision. This is where you LASIK.
And you get Valium, right?
You do get Valium. I'm going to try to go by there today and just sneak in the back. Try to get a couple Valiums.
Okay, so David Stone, Brent made a special point to kind of single him out yesterday.
The highest of praise that I think a 5-star can get in his month second month on campus?
I mean, it was, it was a stamp of approval from Brent saying, whatever you think you know about this guy, he's fully bought in. He's part of our locker room culture, basically. And high praise for Jaden Jackson as well. And I think from what we've seen, they need those guys to contribute.
I walked away with the way Brent talked about those two guys saying, okay, yep, they're going to play. And I think we knew that before, but just to hear him unpromptedly like bring those two up and be like, yeah, they're bought in and they're performing well. I mean, I think the way to put it is Jaden Jackson's floor is higher. He's more ready to play. And then David Stone's ceiling is so much higher. I mean, I just think David, if he can get the technique and fundamentals down, he's going to be special, man.
I always wonder with coaches how much of the praise that they give in the media and stuff is like calculated in a sense. That I think both can be true, that David Stone and Jaden Jackson have both been really, really good, maybe exceeded expectations of where everybody thought they were going to be in the third week of spring, but also a challenge of you got to bring it every day. This isn't going to end when we get done with spring ball. You got to show up every morning with Schmitty during the summer. You got to take care of things on and off the field like a veteran would if you're going to be somebody that is a contributor next season. And I almost saw it as like a little bit of a challenge. Like, these guys are really, really good, but at the same time, we need the day in and day out buy-in that produces the next great Tommy Harris or the next great Gerald McCoy.
It's like
and not to say that they're not. I mean, I think for him to go out of his way, they're obviously doing something right.
I will say this about David Stone, because I've watched him pretty closely just going through drills and things like that. Like, he's got his head down. Like, he's not screaming and hooping and hollering and putting on a show. He is locked into what Todd Bates is telling them every time they're going through a drill. Like, you can tell just by watching the way that he interacts with the coaching staff, like, he's here to get better, to learn, to be a really good football player.
Yeah, and I would say, too, kind of going off what Eddie was saying, I think Brent does, it's somewhat calculated where he's like, he knows that when he says that, David Stone's going to see that.
Sure.
That quote about him being, the most humble, hardworking guy. And, like, that's a message to Stone to keep doing that. And I think it's also a message to some of the other guys.
Validation, but also a challenge.
Yeah, it's a message to some of the other guys to be like, hey, man, like, you need to be like, or, this young guy is doing really well. You need to step up your game. Like, I think it's all very calculated the way he does that.
And I will say, like, underneath all of that, with the talk of Jaden Jackson and David Stone, and as happy as they are with the freshman defensive tackles, I thought it was pretty good news about Grayson Halton and Devon Sears. And Devon Sears, it seems like, is having a really good spring.
He's a big dude. Like,
yeah.
And it sounded like, did Brent say Grayson's up to like 295?
295, and he said that Sears is getting closer to 300.
I mean, if you can get both those guys around the 300s, you're sitting in a pretty good spot. It's just those two guys, you just want to see him play. I mean, I think we keep hearing about them, but it's like, okay, can they do it on Saturdays? It's a lot different.
Well, and maybe they know that's what Halton's hang-up is, because we've seen flashes from him, but maybe unless he's bigger, that he's just not going to be able to be in a game for, and play that way consistently for 4 quarters. Josh?
Yeah, that's Grayson Halton. If he can be 90% as explosive as he was as a sophomore at 300 pounds, that guy's a good defensive tackle at 300 pounds. Like that, he is I like Grayson Halton a lot. And he was a guy, I remember when OU signed him, I wasn't the biggest fan, but the second you saw him on the field, you're like, okay, he's twitchy, he can do some things. But you just kept running the same problem. Like, can he carry that weight? Can he carry that weight? But if he's 295 right now, I mean, guys, that's some of the best news I think OU could have out of this spring is him coming out healthy, putting on that kind of size. And if they still feel good about where he is, playing his type of game, he's never going to be a two zone run, block eating guy. That's not his game. But if he can still be explosive and twitchy, I like a lot of what he's got to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a puzzle right now. I think we see a lot of bodies out there. We know that DJ Terry is going to be a factor. We think Jaden Jackson could be. I mean, but like you look at guys like Champ Sanders and Marcus Strong. Like, what's their ability to contribute this year? And you can't tell that from watching them go through drills and practice.
No, and they're going to have to go out and make plays. That's why, when you go back and you look at the Jacob Lacey retirement, it's just such an unfortunate situation for him. But it would feel a lot more calmer, I think, on the interior defensive line if they just had one more veteran presence. Maybe two would be great, but just one more at least that you could go, okay, those guys are going to start, and then we're going to rotate in these freshmen.
Yeah, I think you want like a 6-man rotation, and right now they're sitting at like 4 or 5 when you say DJ Terry, Grayson Halton, Jaden Jackson, and David Stone, and then maybe Devon Sears, and then after that you're like, okay, who's maybe Marcus Strong or Champ Sanders, who I've heard Champ Sanders has had a pretty good spring too, but
his name comes up quite a bit.
You just need somebody who's played. That's the thing is like I just named 5 guys. And only one of them has actually played meaningful college football, and that's DJ Terry.
Well, look at, and it might be a little bit of a bad analogy, but just look at the way that Brent talked about the cornerback unit yesterday and how far they've come. And you think back to last year, and that's where the defensive line this year is kind of at, where you only have really, truly one guy that had made a start in Woody Washington. This year, that's DJ Terry on the defensive line.
Yeah, I would just say this, taking pictures of that one-on-one and going back and editing all that stuff, I would say those two flashed, not all the time, but talking about Ashton Sanders and Devon Sears, Devon Sears, you're right, he looks the part. He's a big dude. He's wide, too. Sometimes you confuse which one's DJ Terry and which one's Devon Sears, even though there's a big weight difference.
Noticeably bigger than what he was last year.
Yeah.
Sears.
So, I think those two guys, as much as David Stone and Jaden Jackson could, make them better. I think those two are keys, really.
Real quick, just moving out to the defensive end group.
Yeah.
George and I talked about this yesterday. Is it concerning at all that PJ's name doesn't come up a lot?
It's strange, man. He still stands out there and he looks the part.
Great. He looks great.
But it's we talked about Nigel Smith earlier. It's you see a little something from him, a little spark. And I can't say that I ever really see that watching PJ. Not that we see a whole lot, but did he even do any one-on-ones the other day when we were out there watching?
Not that I could remember, no.
No.
So maybe he's nicked up or something.
Maybe. And it's also just weird we haven't heard, there hasn't been any, whispers, because we hear about certain guys, from people, and they're like, oh, this guy, was really good in practice today.
We talked to Trace Ford every week, last year, and he was always mentioning 2 people, R. Mason Thomas and PJ Barroway, and how much of a, just how talented he is.
Here's my concern. I don't want to be doom pod today, but my thing with PJ is he just one of those guys that is a super freak athlete, but maybe he's just not a great football
He doesn't
player.
love football?
Well, I don't know if it's.
I think it's
love football.
It's a little too early to say that.
Yeah,
but,
I think it is too.
And who knows?
That's just the deep down concern of
Josh,
man,
you followed
there?
him since he was in high school.
The expectations are so high though for him.
Yeah.
And that's, guys, to me, that's my biggest concern. When you guys talk about nobody mentioning him, it's in OU's best interest for PJ Adebawore for them to present him as this guy's an emerging star. He's a 5-star we're developing, because that's how you recruit future 5-stars. You go and say, we took this guy, look what he's doing, look where he's at now. That's even bigger when a guy has a kind of spotlight like PJ did, where he was, on 3. I think he was the number 10 overall player in the class in that 2023 group. So it is. It's because I kind of I'm like you. I saw the video. I think it was the Sights and Sounds from yesterday, where Eddie or somebody was videoing him walking around, and you're just like, holy crap!
Yeah,
that's perfect. That's exactly what you want it to look like. But yet there's no buzz. Now I will say, you guys mentioned not seeing him in a one-on-ones. That makes me feel, I hate to say it, but better. Okay, something's off here. He's dealing with a shoulder or a hamstring or something like that, because, especially shoulder has been an issue for PJ at different points in time. So, and again, that's pure speculation. I don't know. I'm just saying, that makes me feel like maybe he's not full go yet. and that explains why we're not hearing his name as much.
There's a lot of guys too that we'll see not do one-on-ones. Like R. Mason Thomas has not done a one-on-one, and he's been dealing with the ankle stuff. That I think that they're easing some of these. It's spring practice.
It wasn't like keep the freshman out because Nigel Smith was doing them, but you didn't see Danny Okoye doing them.
Exactly. So I think it's too early to tell. It's just those things they creep into your head like, man, is he ever going to get
That's
there?
why I was going to say we should put out the disclaimer. Somebody's going to listen to this and think that we think he's a bust.
We've
not
seen
the case.
3 out of the 7 practices.
And we've seen 30 minutes of the practice.
And I do think he's going to be in. I have heard that he's in the rotation.
Sure.
I just think it's pretty clear that Ethan Downs and R. Mason are kind of their 2 guys on the edge right now in terms of starters. But
you know what? I think you're alarmed because Brent mentioned pretty much every player on the roster yesterday, and he did mention
PJ.
He mentioned Eric McCarty.
Yeah. He went over the entire roster yesterday. Legitimately. I do think, though, that it's a good problem to have when you can get through all the names and at least say something positive about, basically a guy at each position.
Mm-hmm.
He did mention PJ here. He said that.
Oh, did he? Okay.
He's over 250 pounds and looking good. Okay. That's basically what he said. So, but like we said, I honestly think he hit on just damn near every single player on the roster yesterday.
I think it is interesting to looking out there, seeing guys that are coming back from injuries or cleanups like Robert Spears Jennings or Gentry Williams. Like they're doing a lot. I'm sure they're not doing live stuff as much, but. Like, they're doing a lot of stuff. I was concerned, like, Gentry Williams, wouldn't be doing much of anything, but he's going through all the drills, the tackling dummy stuff. He's doing all that. So he looks like he's pretty close, which is good to see.
Gentry?
Is he?
I did not see Gentry do that. He's out there and he's got it
suited up.
No, I have tons of pictures of him out there going through drills.
Prove it.
Yeah, I need to see these.
I'll prove it.
I think he's got tennis shoes on. Doesn't he?
Yeah.
There's another really tall number 9 with dreads then that looks...
You might be getting him confused with Vickers, who's number 8, and he has dreads.
Possibly. That's a good possibility. In fact, that might be my bet. That might be my favorite right now.
Because number 8, number 9
mortified now, and I want to delete half this pod. I can't get to the server on my Mac. I'm having problems. Anyway, there it is.
Let's see.
Well, you guys go ahead. I'll find this as we go along, and then we.
Do we want to talk offensive line?
Yes,
because I feel like we've been putting that off.
I think it's offensive line also giving us perspective on where OU is in terms of the portal, how aggressive they're willing to be, how much they're looking at it.
I think that.
It's pretty obvious.
It's an obvious case of if there's somebody out there that can come in and contribute and help, of course they're going to go look at them. But I don't think that they're going to just go in the portal and grab 3 guys just because.
And it's hard right now because
you don't know who's going to be in there.
Exactly. Yet. There hasn't been a whole lot of entries in terms of guys going in the spring portal just yet. I think we looked it up yesterday, Eddie. Is it May 1st?
Yes.
That it opens. So. It's still a ways away, but I think Brent made it pretty clear yesterday when he was asked about the portal and being prepared for it and finding guys that fit. I think it's also clear they're probably going to lose a couple guys in the spring portal. That's probably inevitable, but you would be naive to think that they wouldn't be looking at least some. And I think it's every position on the offensive line. I don't think.
I think it's every position on the team. If there's somebody that they think they can, that's basically what Brent said yesterday was. If they can bring somebody in, if they can identify somebody that's in the portal that not only could help them on the field, but obviously fit in with the culture and all that kind of stuff, they're going to go after them.
Yeah, I just think it's going to definitely be a priority on the offensive and defensive line.
And look,
get at least 1 or 2 guys.
100%.
I know what the criticism from the fans is going to be, and I think it's warranted. But if OU's going up against someone else that is spending tons of money on NIL and willing to pay players a lot, it's a really good player. There's unless they're not as interested in money as they are in football, it's going to be hard for them to land one of those guys. I'm talking about offensive linemen that can make a difference.
Why would it be hard? If the selling point is, hey, you could start. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. That's a great selling point. But what if the kid's getting $800,000 from somebody else? They're not going to pay that.
I mean, that's just the portal in general. They've been through that.
I mean, I think that's just you got to find the kids with the. I mean, you got to find the kid with the right priorities. But I don't. I mean, this is just going to get into the same old argument, Caden Green argument. You know, or who was the kid? Lance Hurd. I mean, that's just going to get into that kind of argument again. But
I mean, I think that's just recruiting in general these days, to a certain extent.
That doesn't mean that they can't. They have to go and try. I mean, I mean,
100%.
Do you guys think it would be worse at this point in the year or better? I could see it either way as far as what the market looks like, because teams are going to know what they do and don't have to spend. Like they know that, it's not like the spring where you're kind of putting it all together at the same time. Like, okay, we've got $200,000 left in our budget, or we've got 75 or whatever it may be. And we've got 3 spots, or we've got 2 spots, I wonder if it is, I don't know, easier for OU to navigate, because there's not going to be this, well, we had a commitment from this guy, but now he's going to A&M. So now we've got a little more money to put over here. It feels like everybody kind of knows what their budget is, and it's not going to be as turbulent.
It's also interesting, too, and I think that's why this spring portal is going to be so interesting, is because, how many guys are going to be leaving schools, wherever they may be, that are in line to start next season? I wouldn't think that there's going to be a whole lot of movement in terms of guys. Now, maybe young guys that have a lot of promise, but then you're back to square one in terms of, well, this guy's not going to be able to contribute this season. Should you just wait it out and then go full in the fall portal? I don't know. And then the other side of it all is if a guy does leave that is in line to start somewhere, does he kind of hold all to the cart? Can he put a team or a program put their feet to the fire in a way that basically, does he hold all the cards if you were to enter the spring and say, I can demand this amount of money because I know that a team, whoever's recruiting me out of the portal during the spring, is really going to be in a bad way. They're going to need me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And that the thing I'd be interested to hear, you guys have seen practice. Like, I just know what I've heard. I know what I've seen through the video. Am I crazy to think that offensive line may be taking priority over defensive tackle? Like, as far as like they've got to have at least one more body on the offensive line.
I think it's definitely fair, because I think that some of these young guys on the defensive line have been a little bit further ahead than what they anticipated. Whereas the offensive line, I think a couple of guys they got in the portal maybe aren't getting to where they thought they would be, or maybe a couple guys that have been on campus aren't getting to where they thought they would be. So, and I think that they also just view it as, I mean, Josh, you've talked about it. The numbers, they just don't have the numbers that you would want on an offensive line. And so I think that it's definitely taken a little bit more priority, because they look at the defensive line and they say, okay, we could use one more body, but we could live with playing David Stone and Jaden Jackson a little bit more next year. Whereas on the other side, it's like they honestly do not have somebody at center right now that is totally comfortable. And I would say the same as at tackle. It's kind of a mystery. So I definitely think offensive line has become a bit more of a priority.
No doubt. It really is going to be interesting. And I think that there are position groups that you could probably kind of cross off as, like, I don't think that they need more wide receivers. I don't think that they need more safeties. I don't think that they need quarterbacks. It really is just 2 positions that I think that they would add, and obviously linebackers full.
All right, I would like to say I have looked through all my pictures.
And
granted, I just had to leave the podcast to do contract work, to be the head of a burgeoning construction empire. So I've got a lot of irons on the fire right now.
He wasn't out there.
Yeah, Ginger Williams was not out there.
I somehow confused. Now, here's Bob, you want to go home? I'll send you home. No laughing from the other room, all right? I will say, here's what confused me. Because Robert Spears Jennings, wears that little strap on his shoulder that, keeps his shoulder. And because Bakari Vickers wears the same thing, but he does have blonde dreads. Bakari Vickers, that's how, and he's a lot skinnier.
So it was Makari Vickers.
It was Makari Vickers, you son of a bitch. Yes.
You should see my notes. I'll show you my notes sometimes. I have taken notes on almost every single player and what they wear on almost every single part of their body part, just so I know who's who and who is dealing with what.
I'm starting to.
I usually just look at the numbers.
Yeah. Well, I do that too.
Did this happen at practice, George, or is this going to get weird?
Well, but here's the problem with the DBs. All their numbers are scrunched up.
Exactly. That's
like
why
if you take photos, you notice
a lot of the offensive and defensive linemen, their numbers are scrunched up. I mean, it's
an 8 becomes a 9 very
You also
easily.
are trying to watch from a pretty far distance sometimes. So I've just taken some notes on some guys to know what they like to wear.
You know who's the most photogenic defensive back? Reggie Powers III.
Reggie Powers looks great. He looks awesome out there.
He's pretty stacked up.
That safety room has got some dudes. I mean, there's some. I mean, Michael Boganowski looks awesome.
See those things, the shoulder straps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's from keeping their arm from getting too far away.
I have no idea.
It's a
Now,
good story.
Kerry, you know the fun fact about Reggie Powers, right?
No, because I don't even know what numbers people are apparently anymore.
He is a relative of John Legend.
No.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Like,
should I tell him that Chrissy
cousin
Teigen
or
follows me
something.
on Twitter?
No, wow. I mean, it's all aligning.
I don't know if she still follows me. She kind of quit Twitter.
Too busy.
If you're that famous, I would quit Twitter too.
She was just
can't
getting
be
in.
good.
She was like me. She was getting in fights with everybody all the time. So,
You and Chrissy have so much in common. I've never thought about it before.
oh shit, she doesn't follow me anymore. Damn. I don't know what Bob just said, but he really is going to go home. I'm kidding, Bob. So, no, but are we done with the portal conversation, or do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think it's just clear that there's just a few spots that they would like to add if the right guys come along. And even if the right guys don't come along, I wouldn't be shocked if they just take a flyer on somebody, especially on the offensive line.
What I like is how much they're embracing this, guys. Like we listen to fans for years talk about, why is Oklahoma only going into a season with 82 guys or 83 guys on scholarship? OU's at the max, and they're still like, we're going to find some more guys. Like, that there is a very aggressive demeanor to roster building because Brent knows. I mean, that's what he's competing against. I mean, and we talked about it when he came from Clemson. They were basically the extra SEC program. But now, I mean, he is at an SEC program, and he knows. Like, that's the way these schools build, is just having kind of a cutthroat mentality to how you manage your roster. And if a guy's not good enough, you got to go find someone who is.
I do think they feel really good about their guards. I think
they should.
I think Ozeda's done really well, and Fabici Wiwu has been really impressive. Landon Hatchin hasn't been out there yet, but I think they like him. And then
Garen.
Oh yeah, Garen Hatchett. Who did I say?
Landon, his brother.
Yeah, I think they feel pretty good about guard.
And I think the thing that we don't talk enough about is, regardless of what we're hearing about how people are doing or what's happening, like Bill, he's out there experimenting too, as much as he's not just putting the ones and the twos out there.
That's my biggest kind of takeaway from like scrimmage stuff where, obviously the offensive line did not play well. It just is hard for me to look at it and go, this thing sucks or this thing's really good. Either way, when you don't have the 5 that you're really going to be counting on when September rolls around.
And you combine that with the fact that they're installing a new offense with a new play caller, and a new quarterback, all of that combined, it's just, I wouldn't hit the panic button yet. I feel like everybody's already hit the panic button on the offensive line. I wouldn't do that quite yet.
I don't think they're going to be the worst group in the SEC, but to say that they're closer to the bottom or closer to the top than the bottom, I think that'd be a little naive to think too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably a middle of the road SEC offensive line. Like, it's not great, it's not special, but there's some good pieces. George,
that's the difference in winning 11 or 10 games versus 7 and 8, and that's drastically going to be different the way that we talk about those types of seasons.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing is it's a year like last year. You could have gotten away with this offensive line a lot more easily than they will this year because they're just facing a different caliber of athlete week in and week out in the front four.
I'm going to do a choose your own adventure here. Eddie, would you prefer to go watch the Cubs and work on? Who are you watching then?
The Marlins and the Angels and the Rangers and the Rays.
Oh my God, you're watching that many.
There's baseball on.
Would you rather retire and do that and prepare for the YouTube practice report?
There's nothing to prepare.
Okay, is it done?
Yeah.
All right. George, you get the hatchet job then.
I'll get out of here. I am going to plug. I talked to Bauer Sharp's parents. One guy that I think has really stuck out. Great story. Just awesome family. I think he's going to be a dude. I'm not saying he's going to go and be Jermaine Gresham, but I do think he's going to be a big help. So I'm looking forward to people reading that because I feel like nobody really knows anything about the guy, but super cool story, super cool family.
And by the way, we should also probably mention tight end wise, Jake Roberts is still limited. He's dressed now. He's in he's not doing drills though with the.
He's limited. I think is probably the best way to say it. The way that they talk about him and the way that he brings in a little, not even a little bit, a whole lot of experience. I'm not just terribly concerned. I almost put him in the same regard of somebody like a
Casey Thompson,
or maybe more so like a Gentry that has played a lot of football. That you're going to get something out of spring. I'm not worried when the time comes for him to be a tight end that's going to be a big help in that room.
Yeah, and it looks like he's, like you said, it looks like he's taking all the mental reps that you would want to. I'm sure he's in the he's definitely in the meeting rooms and
100%
going over the offense and things like that. So
100%.
Okay, we'll bring in Bob Prisbillo now, and first off, it's just President Harroz, super nice guy, always really nice to me. I'm not trying to just outright rip him, but the stuff about trying to pit cities against cities.
He got a little cockstrong in front of the media. That's what happened. It's like, hey, man, I don't know about that.
Was this like at a giving day?
He was
end of the day,
himself.
Having some drinks and raised a bunch of money, and he just turned it into the city of Oakland all of a sudden.
He really did, but I think it'll pass, especially since it won't go to a citizen vote, as we're both here in Norman. We know
it's the TIF committee. Yeah,
a lot of that stuff just won't pass. I feel like it'll be good, and it's going to be necessary in order for, I think, not necessarily to keep Porter Moser, but to sell the program. I think it's something that they need, that shot in the arm. We know they're trying to be more competitive with NIL, and I think they're doing a better job with that. But this would be like another reason as to why maybe OU can be the choice where 2-3 years ago it wouldn't have been.
Lloyd Noble was built in 1975. This was a fact that I came up with myself and blew my own mind. You realize in 1988, when OU played for the national championship, Lloyd Noble was 13 years old as a building. It's almost 50 now.
No one wants to go to his 50th birthday party.
Sometimes you got to put these dogs out to pasture.
No one wants to go to that.
There's let's face it, basketball has been put on the back burner for the entirety of Joe Castiglione's tenure at Oklahoma. And you know what? I think we also have to have that discussion of, like, if you felt like it was going to hurt the OU football program by putting more resources into basketball or taking some of the donations away, like if you didn't have the newly formed Switzer Center because you at some point you wanted to commit resources to basketball. Let's face it, with baseball and softball, they knew it had to be done, but it could be done at a much more manageable cost. They thought like $30 million for both. I think Lovefield ended up almost being twice that when it was said and done. Baseball will certainly be more than the $30 million that they thought. But that's stuff that they can do and that they need. Whereas basketball, it's just kind of one of those things. They can get by without doing it, but it doesn't mean that the program is going to be elite.
I think that they've nickel and dimed it for so long. It was like, all right, we'll throw a little money here. We'll do a little.
They're doing renovations right now.
They are. I mean,
right. Like in totality, when you look up, you could have gone, I could have just bought a brand new house by doing all of this. And it's taken years and years and years to add up to where it's
if you started a 50 years ago, if you started a fund like yearly, like $5 million a year or something, raise it just for the future arena when this thing gets so old, you'd have another Taj Mahal out there.
I mean, that gift by Blake Griffin was incredible, but I almost felt like oh, we got to keep it here then. If the Griffin Center's here, it's got to stay here.
It put them in a little bit of a tight spot on that. They should have just used the money to kickstart, and it's easy to say this now, but they should have just used the money to kickstart a brand new arena instead of just building a practice facility on either side.
But it was putting lipstick
Griffin
on a
Center.
pig,
yeah,
which
100%.
they've done many times over the years.
I always kind of go back to this idea, too, that it surprises me in a way because I do know that Joe C. loves the sport of college basketball.
He's always there.
He's always been
the
a
NCAA
prominent...
on the NCAA tournament committee for over probably a decade's worth of work at least on that.
Yeah, he was the tournament director there. I don't remember what year it was exactly, but it's just surprising to me that it's been pushed for so long like that. But at the same time, when getting back to the President Harroz stuff, I just don't believe it. I mean, I don't think that OU all of a sudden you look up and they're negotiating with the city of Mustang or Yukon or Moore with whoever to build a new arena. I don't believe that would be the case.
I was talking about it this morning. I said, you think Highway 9's bad? Let's put an arena on 19th Street and more.
Right? Oh, dear God.
People put it out there past like Dick's or something.
People just would stop coming to games altogether.
That would be a nightmare.
Now, I do think that it would probably be really, really nice, all that kind of stuff. I just don't believe that they would actually get to that point. I guess in a way, I don't believe that they would get to that point. Now you look up and maybe the Kansas City Royals are going to have to move because of the vote last night in Kansas
Hopefully
City.
just to Kansas.
It's weird. That's a weird deal. But
it was like 58% against.
Yeah, it wasn't close.
I think that they really and I don't know the ins and outs of what actually happened, but I think that the teams did not do themselves a good deed on their part with what they presented to the citizens of Kansas City. Kind of went against everything that they had agreed upon. And then
I think
2 months ago, they unveiled this brand new thing. And it was like they presented 2 spots that they were like, it's going to be here or here. And they went to a third spot. And I think all the citizens were like, what are you talking about?
Did I get clickbaited or it's not Lamar Hunt. Who's the owner now? What's the son that's the owner?
Clark Hunt.
Clark Hunt.
Is it Clark? I think it is. The one with the hot daughter?
Yes, that's immediately what I think of is his Instagram daughter. Is it true that he has like a 3-story home inside Arrowhead?
I think so, yeah.
That's insane. And the locker rooms are awful.
Well,
he got that horrible review. I think that's why
they were voted to have the worst facilities in the NFL.
They got Fs. Like they were the only team that had like 4 Fs. They only had 1 non-F grade by the NFLPA poll. Like I think the backlash, and I don't know this for a fact, but I assume, and we know plenty of people in Kansas City, we could ask them. I would assume they were like, well, you're such a cheap ass that we have these terrible facilities, yet you build a home inside of it with your own money. Like, why do we have to pay for this?
The Royals were going to put up, I think, $1 billion, the ownership group was. But it was a $2 billion project that they presented. And I think
Hunt's not the owner of the Royals.
Right. It's the Sherman family or something like that. The Chiefs were going to put up, I think, $300 million, but that was an $800 million project. So they needed $500 million more. It's just... I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I'm glad that Oklahoma City passed the vote and we don't have to worry about something like this. But I think it is a little bit of a same idea that OU basketball is going through in terms of they let it get so bad for so long. Now they are in really need of help and there's no help to be given.
Our producer in the morning, Teabag, suggested that it'd be really easy. You just need to put an O on the Royals helmet. OKC. The KC's already on.
I don't want a baseball team here.
That would be like hard for you, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard. You'd choose the Cubs.
I would cheer for them, but it wouldn't be the same fandom that I have. I don't want.
But
that's
they're
just
an
a
AL
personal
team.
Yeah, I don't like.
You can go AL.
I don't think you.
Did you not grow up with an
AL
AL team that you kind of were
not
fond
really.
of?
No.
Just all Cubs.
Because they didn't play the right way. They had the DH.
Right.
There you go.
And that's just such a brutal sport for a really small market to try and compete in.
No,
there's no way Oklahoma City right now can't.
I mean,
sustain
Tampa Bay does it, but they do it by the skin of their teeth. They do it through development and all that kind of stuff. It
would take away from the Thunder too.
As much as I love the Thunder so much, it's like 41 games a night is a real tough ask. You have a lot of people that split season tickets, all that kind of stuff. You're doubling that with baseball with 81. Like it's a tough ask.
But
and God, you talk about an arena. Have you guys seen Tampa's stadium?
Oh,
no,
it's a
I've
joke.
never been to St. Pete.
It's the most atrocious thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like it's like cinder blocks. It's unbelievable.
Tropicana.
It was built on the cheap.
It's just terrible.
But back to the arena. I mean, we think it's positioning by Joe Harroz. I mean, it can't be anything else.
From everything that we've heard, I think the vote's going to pass, or they feel like it's going to have a good opportunity
it's that
to pass
TIF
next
committee.
week.
Yeah, I mean, it's April 11th is the next meeting. I think citizens can speak at that. I mean, but
how much is that going to help?
Hopefully,
Probably
Chad
none.
Kroger guy will show up or something.
Should I go speak at it next Thursday?
Are you joining the Channel 9 news team?
Do I need to?
I thought they invited people.
Oh, that's the weather. That's the weather stuff. That's with DP9, one of my good friends.
Okay.
David Payne.
Did you end up at the station that night?
Absolutely not.
George really wants to go storm chasing, which is
I do
kind of
too.
disturbing.
I told Reed Timmer that I want to go at some point this spring. I'm gonna
In the
try to work
Dominator?
it out. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's the only way.
The only way you would go is
either that or go up in the air with Mark Dillard and Channel 4.
Yeah.
Or Jim Gardner. I'd go up with Jim Gardner. I think we'd have fun.
Eddie, I cannot tell you the level
fly
of
me to
jealousy that
Antifa
Tiffany
meeting.
would experience
What?
with the Reed Timmer stuff. I can't tell you the level of jealousy that Tiffany would be experiencing. You would need to send her pictures just to rub it in as much as humanly possible.
It would be awesome. The only problem is, if I go do that, I'm going to have to really plan it out and probably take morning radio off because I feel like they're always out until I don't want to be in the panhandle of Texas at 10:30 on a Wednesday. Yeah. That'd be
when there's
very
no weather
to my life
in Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
kind of like that last one. Anyway,
I mean, he ended up finding it though. He got the gorilla hail in I think North Denton.
The Kingfisher?
No, it was like he was down in Texas. He ended up in Texas.
Okay,
started the day in Oklahoma City, but ended up the day in Texas.
So I mean that's really, it's up to whether that now. If it doesn't pass, does OU finally look themselves in the eyes and say, we have to dedicate resources to doing something ourselves?
If it doesn't pass, you're
or
completely back to square one, right?
Feels like it.
I mean, if it doesn't pass, I don't think they're going to go out and take bids from other cities to build an entertainment district. I don't think Moore is interested in doing that. I mean,
what does the city get? Like Moore, Mustang, Yukon, Blanchard, wherever. Like, what do they get out of that?
Yeah, they're just hosting your games.
Besides ponying up the money to host.
I'm sorry, but Zach Bryan or whoever's not going to Blanchard to do a concert.
No, not at all.
It would be the biggest waste of money a city could. I mean,
while we're talking about my dreams, by the way, you think there's any chance that there's some people that know Zach Bryan.
Uh-huh.
I want to be the revival guy in Oklahoma City. What a moment that would be.
I don't think I can be responsible for setting that up because George, it'll cause friction in the office.
We could both do it.
But then you have other people that know the same people that will probably want to do it, like Gabe.
We could all three do it. I don't care. I just want to be on the stage when Zach Bryan comes to town. I think that's coming this summer.
George has tickets. He has a loan ticket.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't need a ticket.
May 17th. Also,
May 17th.
Also not going alone anymore.
Did you sell your main ticket that you paid out the ass for and get two?
No, just she went ahead.
Plus one.
She went ahead and bought
Got a plus one from Zach.
I wish.
Brianna,
no, she went ahead and bought one too. So
hope you stay together.
There you
go. Wait. So
if
you managed to
Zach's
find a ticket right next to yours?
Zach's going to give me
I think it was
backstage
GA.
pass, I'm in on that.
I think it was GA, Josh.
Oh, okay.
Down on the floor.
I was trying to understand. I was like, that's a amazing coincidence.
Either way, people go to Zach Bryan concerts because they love him and they want to see him.
Mm-hmm.
It probably doesn't matter what arena Oklahoma's playing in if they don't have a roster that Oklahoma fans want to see.
And here we go.
But that's
a very good point.
Leads into the portal exodus.
Yep.
I don't even want to call it an exodus. where are you in terms, Bob, of you got the 4 in the portal, Otega Owe, John Hughley, Losu on, and now Javier McCollum. I know this sounds really bad, and I'm not trying to shit on anybody, but I guess I kind of am. I think there's great opportunity. Oklahoma could have a better roster next year
than they
did last year.
They need to, and that's why you look at least 3 out of 4, and you feel like, well, whoever that guy was down the stretch wasn't going to help your team next season unless they had an attitude adjustment or decided they really wanted to put in the work. And you just see, like, teams aren't growing older together. They're leaving if they feel like the first sign of real issues, go ahead and bolt. And now what you're looking here, the Sooners keep making cuts. That's great and all. So Porter Moser's message is getting through to some of these elite targets. But yeah, we're a couple weeks in, and I don't think we're that close toward the initial commitment. You still feel really good about Sean Padula, Kevin Overton, especially with Overton being the first official visitor for OU during this process during Monday, Tuesday, as we get into a dead period that goes from Thursday to Thursday. So we're going to have a little 8-day stretch here where you kind of reconvene, reevaluate, and then decide who you want to attack heading into next week.
It's such a tough conversation to have, too, because I understand the fan that looks at the 4 guys that are leaving and they go, Porter Moser's back in the portal again. It's hard to build a program when you have the roster turnover each year. But I also think that it should be noted and said that this isn't just an Oklahoma problem as much as this has become a massive, massive college basketball.
And it doesn't matter if you make the tournament. I
Right.
mean, you've seen, as soon as these teams are knocked out, 3 or 4 from so-and-so is gone. It's like, that's just the way that it works. And it's the good thing was that Moser and staff last year finally accepted that, I felt, and thought, okay, we can't get butthurt about Mo Gibson leaving 2 years ago, Jalen Hill leaving last year. If they want to leave, we can't fight it. We need to just adapt and move on. And I think Javier McCollum would have been like a gut punch last year. Like, really? After all we've done for you, you're going to... Now I think, okay, then what guard can we get that's going to be even better than him? Do we need to try to bring in?
Let me ask you, because, I mean, I've heard it tossed around a little bit in the office, but do you get the sense that basketball players are more involved with agents than other sports trying to get them an NIL deal somewhere else?
Well, you're hearing it in portal announcements, like so-and-so agent is telling me that this is happening. So I think it's absolutely valid point, and that's why you wonder, like, where is the advice coming from for some of these guys? What are they listening to? Why are they listening to it? And how it can backfire.
I think you can, if you're a really good player, you can make pretty good money in the portal if you transfer. But we're seeing guys that redshirted that are transferring, didn't even play last year. Like, I don't understand the thinking behind some of that stuff.
I think a little bit of it has to do with just the roster, the way that college basketball teams construct a roster. You're already talking about 15 guys as opposed to 85 or 120 or 130 on a football team. There's more money to go around, especially for a guy that can make a move from a starting position to another school. It's like Nigel Pack was the guy, or Nigel Pack and CJ Nolan. I know that they're completely different players. Those were the 2 guys that it was just like, oh, there's that much money. As far as Nigel Pack had done something at K-State, then he ends up at Miami.
Well, we knew Miami was throwing money around.
That was like when it was really big too.
Yes.
And then you had CJ Nolan, who ended up, he first committed to St. Louis out of Oklahoma. And I remember thinking he got something like 6 figures. It was over $150,000.
Yep.
I was just like, holy shit, he's getting this much money. He played 6 minutes a game last year.
And probably about 20 minutes is all he could afford to play physically.
He looked good this year at North Texas. But at the same time, it was just like, holy crap, these guys are getting this much money and they played this amount, very, very small amounts of minutes.
Well, it was crazy out there in the beginning. I mean, the market's going to adjust.
It's still crazy.
It's still crazy, but it's going to continue to adjust. I mean,
it has to. It has to.
Yeah, I don't think the Caden Green type deals will be happening in 3 years. Maybe 2.
Maybe even 1. But that would be like Caden Green's a little bit of a different scenario. That's like a
local.
I'm just trying to think of an example of somebody that's projected to be like an All-American someday, as opposed to somebody that's on the bottom end, maybe a rotational guy, 6th, 7th guy off the bench that all of a sudden looks up. Yeah, like John Hughley is a great example. Like, I don't know what he's going to get, but I know the number's probably going to shock me at the end of the day. But at the same time, like, there is great opportunity for Porter during this portal session or whatever you want to call it. You have to hit on a couple of these guys, You have to.
I mean, you have to.
I don't think that Porter Moser is going to be the coach at Oklahoma next year if he strikes out on a Kevin Overton or if he strikes out on a Sean Padula. Like, I'm kind of thinking of those guys now as guys that they're in the starting lineup.
They're already in. Exactly.
They're in the starting lineup.
Right. You're like, you have 5 to play with, but in your mind, you're thinking they only have 3 because they got Padula, they have Overton. It's just about wrapping that up, making it official, because what you're seeing is that some of the guys that they're in for is going the opposite. Like, it's like Zeke. From yesterday.
But at the same time, it was like, I think when you looked at what that was, I would have had his head examined if he would have come to Oklahoma over Kansas.
And I think we got another one coming up with Tony Perkins, who left Iowa. He's an Indianapolis kid. The Hoosiers are in his final 6. I don't think it's OU. I think it's the Hoosiers. But that needs to be the same way with any sort of final list with Padula, because I know Creighton's been heavily involved there.
Sure.
Or Overton. It needs to be, no, you're coming back home. Everyone else is having OU in their list, but then going to the home school. It needs to work the same way where they can have these lists, but they're still being Sooners.
You know what's crazy about just the NIL sport in general is you look at men's basketball. Look at women's basketball. Women's basketball, like, they get their stars, like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, like even go to Livy Dunn. But like women's athletes, they're not doing. There's not this market for them to make money moving teams.
Correct.
The market is for them to become brands and make money off of that.
Right.
And that's working really, really well. And the sport is growing.
Is it crazy to say that, like, NIL in the women's college basketball particularly, and I think softball is a little bit different here than anywhere else. Women's college basketball, though, is like the poster child for what I think everybody
NIL could be.
wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. But there's, in a way, I think there's so much more money on the men's side of it, just in terms of how it's being dispersed out amongst a team, that it...
Well, the poster child for men's basketball is right now is DJ Burns.
Sure.
Like, okay, some guy that was at Winthrop, he went to NC State, he got better. Like, what would he be worth now another year? Like, if he wanted to take another leap, because that's where most of that, like, he's probably not going to make that money marketing-wise.
In all heart of hearts, though, if DJ Burns has the type of ending to the year that he had this year, and let's be honest, he had a decent year. He's had a really good run over the last couple weeks.
Yes.
But if he would have had that as a junior last year, he's probably in the portal. He's probably leaving North Carolina State. He's playing at Kansas this year or Kentucky or wherever that some of these schools that really go all in on NIL would have opened up a bag for him.
It's so messed up.
Yeah.
The men's game versus the women's game.
It's very, very disgusting in a way.
By the way, did you think that DJ Burns looks like Eddie Winslow?
Like from Family Matters?
Yes.
I don't know. No?
You want to see a picture of the actor that played Eddie Winslow?
He didn't have dreads, though, so I don't know.
Did Darius get huge since the show went off the air?
Here, just look at that picture of him right there.
NC State's also a different example of a team that you can build through the portal.
Yeah, and we've seen Kansas State last year was that team. Utah State, of course, is another example. 0% scoring came back to go with this year's team. You don't want to make a habit of it. You don't want to do it every single year, and you wouldn't. You know, the good thing is being able to keep guys like Jacob Cole and Caden Cooper lets you know that the younger guys are still hearing the message.
Sure.
Now, there is a concern that Porter wears people down. And, you know, I don't know if that's what happened with Los and Ortega. There is that concern that type of coaching, that type of intensity.
But then it works for Jalen Moore and Rivaldo Suarez. Although Suarez numbers, I saw somebody arguing about this on the board. Suarez numbers are basically kind of what they were at Oregon, right?
But that's because the first half of his OU season is kind of meh because they didn't know.
Then when they realized he's one of our best.
I think, though, that
he maybe doesn't emerge if Los and Ortega, like, go into the shells that they went into.
I guess depending on how you look at it, though, you could say that I think that the brand of Porter Moser's coaching really works and is really accepted by more mature guys.
Yes.
And I think that when you look at Los or you look at Ortega, and particularly the setbacks that they had as sophomores, I could see how it becomes frustrating saying, I'm busting my ass, putting in all this work, and I'm not getting better. But you have somebody like a Jalen Moore that has gone through the process, that entered the transfer portal, looked for a new destination. Like, you would think that type of style of coaching would really excel with transfer portal guys like a Padula or like an Overton. I don't know.
By the way, Moore just continues to be the story of the portal. I didn't even know OU was looking at him. He was like a last-second entry from Georgia Tech. Last second just pick up.
Yeah.
Because of Jalen Hill.
He was an afterthought.
So all of a sudden, it's like, well, we got to get someone. So you get Moore, and now he is going to be the face of this team. They're already using him, for the Giving Day graphic.
Yeah,
it was
I saw that.
Jalen Moore. Like, their confidence coming back. I'm pretty sure he hosted Kevin Overton.
Yeah.
The way they've been going
That's
back
what it
and
sounds
forth
like.
on social media. So it's like he went from we didn't know who the guy was 12 months ago to now being the cornerstone of this team.
All right, let's get to some recruiting. We had the recruiting report come out yesterday, but obviously, Josh, this is a class of 2025 class that's starting to look better and better, and it seems like there's some momentum being built out there right now.
Yeah, guys. I mean, we talked in the recruiting report. For those that haven't watched it, go over to YouTube/Sooner Scoop and go check out the recruiting report. But we talked yesterday about how if Oklahoma could land Trent Wilson, then you start to see the chips of this defensive line class start to fall where they need to. You kind of have your hallmark interior guy that can be, that next three technique, that guy that's going to be a pass rusher on the inside. And, Oklahoma can be variable with him. They can put him in a 3-man front and he can play outside. They can do a lot of different things with a guy like Trent Wilson. So, for those that don't know, I put in a prediction this morning for him. Our Penn State publisher, Sean Fitz, with On3, has also put an Oklahoma prediction. So there is a lot of buzz that this is going to be Oklahoma. And for those that missed it, he has announced that he is going to announce his decision on April 10th, the same day as we're expecting Malik Hawkins to pick Oklahoma. So that could be a really good day for Oklahoma. And this is happening quite fast because I first heard word this morning, like probably around 7 or 8, that, hey, this might be way before the official visits, that some news comes out. And I had something about it in Woke, and then he announces it a few hours later. So, like, it's all happening pretty quickly with the Trent Wilson situation right now.
Is there anything you can point toward as, like, that's when it changed? Like, it's not Penn State. It's going to be the Sooners, or feel like it's going to be the Sooners.
Yeah, I think, honestly, Bob, it kind of reminds me of Jaden Jackson last year when Oklahoma seemed to be running second to Texas for quite some time, kind of Texas and Ohio State. But I've talked to Ohio State sources; they don't think it's them. And again, I think it's Oklahoma and Penn State. I certainly don't think Penn State's giving up or anything like that, or even after he makes a choice, they may still try to stay in that race. But my impression is that I think, and this, again, this flies in the face of what people sometimes want to believe. I think Oklahoma put together a solid NIL package for him. They impressed him with that. But we know that's not what OU is going to lead with. That's not their thing. And I think him having the relationship with Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis, and Brent Venables, and knowing the opportunities that exist on that defensive line. I mean, you're hearing all this buzz about Jaden Jackson and David Stone. Well, DeJoun Terry's going to be gone next year. Grayson Halton will be a senior. I mean, there is a lot of opportunity for a guy that is of that talent level to come in and play early at a major SEC program. And that's a rare pitch.
Would it still be expected that he makes his official visits even post-commitment? Because we know how Oklahoma feels about that.
Mm-hmm. I would be surprised, because that is something that, and it's not like Oklahoma has been, to their credit, it's you guys know it's something I got into a lot of different arguments about. They've been pretty good about just saying, hey man, if you want to do that, that's fine. Just don't commit. And so I think if he set his date, he's let the schools know,
sure,
or at least the school he's going to has a pretty good idea of what's going to happen on April 10th. So for him to make that choice, assuming that's Oklahoma, like, you know, myself, Chad Simmons, Steve Wiltfong, you know, I know our old buddy Adam Friedman at Rivals has put in a prediction as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that are well connected in that area that think this is going to be Oklahoma. And I think Oklahoma would tell him, hey, don't do that, you know, because we don't want to have to go down that road with you. If you want to wait and take your trips, that's fine. We'll wait for you. I don't think this is a deal where Oklahoma pressured him into an early timeline, because that's just not how they've really operated under Brent.
On the flip side of that, Malik Hawkins will be making his decision on April 10th as well next week. We hit on him a little bit yesterday in the recruiting report on YouTube, just in terms of it's hard to not just kind of fall back on the idea that he's going to be joining his brother and joining the Oklahoma legacy in Norman.
Yeah, it is, you know, for, again, I've dialed back to this because Kerry was always hard on me about this, and rightfully so, but trying to catch everybody up. For those that don't know, Malik Hawkins plays at Frisco Emerson, is kind of a corner safety, plays a lot of corner for Emerson. I think he could grow into a safety. His father is Michael Hawkins, who signed with Oklahoma in the 2002 class, and his older brother is, of course, Michael Hawkins Jr., that is Oklahoma's quarterback now, that you know, I think we've talked a lot about over the last week, starting to draw some strong reviews. You know, the guys mentioned him earlier in the podcast here. So, it's pretty tough to find a scenario that seems plausible that this is not Oklahoma for Malik Hawkins. Because, again, it's not like he's been all over the place and taken all these trips. I can't help but think a lot of his recruiting information is based largely on, you know, going everywhere with Mike Jr. last year and seeing Arkansas up close and seeing all, you know, Texas up close and looking at all the schools that they looked at. I think he had a chance to acquire a lot of information. Now, he's taken his own trips and done some other things, but he hasn't been wildly active and just out somewhere on a trip every weekend or anything like that. So I think that makes it easier to kind of pinpoint what we're looking at here. But a lot of people will try to paint this as, oh, he's just following his brother or whatever. Malik Hawkins is a talented athlete. Like, I think Oklahoma can do some good things with him. And guys, based on what we knew of those cornerback and safety rooms when Brent Venables took the job in early December of 2021 to where those rooms are now, if Brandon Hall and Jay Valai sign off, it's hard to argue. I mean, they're putting together really good units right now.
Does that speak of, you know, 'cause you saw with Peyton, Eli Bowen, maybe just what they're doing right with guys like Peyton and Michael once they get on campus too?
That's an awesome point, Bob. Like, because, I mean, you talk about, you know, Brent talks about culture, and we all know coaches love to throw culture around, talk about it. But I think it's a positive sign that whatever they're doing, the guys seem to like, because you have, you know, Peyton Bowen's been in it for over a year now. Eli's, you know, now he's in it. Mike's been there for several months, and now Malik's ready to make a decision. And if you assume that's going to be Oklahoma, yeah, you know, obviously they're brothers. They talk. Like, if it was bad or if there was something that, you know, maybe Mike didn't feel good about, Malik would know about it. And yet Malik's ready to commit. And again, if you assume what, you know, kind of what we're all expecting to happen, then I think it says a lot for where Oklahoma is. So I think that's a good sign, because we've seen situations in the past, maybe not with brothers, but, you know, good buddies, teammates, where everybody kind of thought, oh, that guy's going to follow so-and-so to Oklahoma. And then it didn't happen. And you kind of wonder, well, what went wrong there? And it's kind of hard not to connect that dot sometimes.
Still a couple weeks away. Spring game visitors starting to get going.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, we know a few. I think probably the one that is most notable to OU fans, Nate Roberts, is expected to be there, the big tight end from Washington. You know, one of, probably before Nate makes a decision, probably one of his final trips to Oklahoma. Now, he'll take an official in the summer and that kind of thing, but it's obviously a big opportunity for Oklahoma to continue to try to, I don't build momentum. I don't even know how you would term it with Nate. It's been such a kind of winding road of a recruitment. Every time you kind of think you know what's happening, it'll take a twist on you. But I think Nate comes down to Oklahoma and Ohio State, and I think everybody's going to throw their best shot at him over the next couple of months.
All right, we got some kind of bug in here today. Flying creature. Anything else that you wanted to hit on recruiting-wise? I mean, we had the recruiting report. I know a lot of stuff in there. Go to YouTube, check it out. If you feel like you're missing any of your recruiting content. We are going to have a stickball coming up this week as well. So
OU Texas.
OU Tech, we can touch on that a little bit, but obviously you talked to Patty Gasso yesterday, right?
Yep.
And she was feeling better this week.
She's still a little sick, so she made us distance just a bit. But Kinsey Hansen is ready. The seniors are ready. The team is ready. This should be one heck of a fun weekend.
Do you get any sense that the Hansen stuff lingers at all?
No, and I think because
it's a wrist thing?
Knee.
Okay.
Because Riley Ludlam did such a great job, they didn't have to try to push her too much.
She could really get healthy and get back.
It's like, all right, so go ahead and take your time and let's circle Texas. And let's see if you're ready. And she definitely is.
And, I mean, coming off the Kansas series, I mean, you thought maybe they could give him a challenge, but it was just no challenge at all.
The one thing, when they start off as the visitors and they can put up a 2 or 3 spot before you even have a chance to bat, that is just so empowering, so intimidating. And that's what they're able to do against Kansas. And if they can do that against Texas, that would be impressive.
Can you imagine if OU was going into the series still with a winning streak?
I think I would be in Austin.
They have a winning streak.
They
have
do
the
have the
longest
longest
winning streak in the country.
They have but I mean the one that was broken.
I mean, absolutely. It's a credit to how they have bounced back since the one loss. But yeah, I mean, all the elements are there for a special weekend in Austin.
Yeah, and that crowd after Hall of Fame Stadium last year and the way that they won that game, and they're going to be just drooling for a win against this Oklahoma team. So it should be a great atmosphere.
Well, they have to win. They can't get swept. I mean, the lead now is
stay
4 games in the Big 12 standings. I mean, if they don't win the series this weekend, their regular season, in a way, for as good as Texas is kind of over.
Yeah.
Like, losing 2 or 3 last weekend in Stillwater, it was
Cowgirls,
a little bit of a gut punch.
And we'll see if the Texas short game. There were a lot of questions yesterday about their speed. They're going to, as much as we've seen the OU defense look really, really good, they're going to have to bring it once again.
Which is even more important that you're getting Kinsey Hansen back behind the plate, who has probably one of the best arms in softball, I would imagine.
Not only one of the best arms, but one of the way she commands the infield. Yeah. If there's one thing that Riley Ludlam maybe had to learn a bit, according to Patty, when I asked about it, she had to learn you got to be vocal. You got to be loud. You're the catcher. You're leading this charge. I know you're just, shy by nature, but if you're going to be in this spot for this team, you're going to have your voice resonate and to have command of what you're telling each person to do.
All right. Well, more coming on Stickball. Yep. But Eddie, big Bedlam series coming up this weekend too.
Yeah,
Sooners feel like they probably have a lot to prove.
They played like
Lamar
shit
series.
The last 2 weekends. Losing the first conference series to West Virginia, losing the doubleheader, and then getting swept by Lamar last week. They went on an 8-game homestand, season-long 8-game homestand, went 2-6. Not exactly the best way to build momentum. On the other side of that, coming out of it, they had a good performance on Tuesday night up in Wichita. You win 11-2. I think that you're going to see a little bit of a rotation change. I think Grant Stevens is going to pitch on Sunday in Stillwater, which is kind of interesting, but it's kind of weird because as bad as they played, you come out of this bad homestand in first place in the Big 12, which is just kind of weird considering everything that went into it. So big Bedlam series this weekend. I think that you're going to see Grant Stevens on Sunday. You're going to see Braden Davis Friday, Kyson Witherspoon Saturday. And we'll see. They have a big couple weeks coming up with Oklahoma State this weekend and then Kansas State coming to town next weekend. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I think we're going to really kind of see what this team's made of the next couple weeks. And on top of all of that, good and bad news. Bad news will go first. I think they're going to try and get a medical redshirt for Carter Frederick. I don't think he's going to play the rest of the year. The good news, I've heard, and we're going to talk to Skip on Thursday, so maybe we'll know a little bit more about the situation. I don't think it's out of the question that you see John Spikerman this weekend. Now,
as a pitch runner type deal?
That's what I need clarification on. I think that, yes, pinch runner would probably be most likely. I think he's ahead of schedule, though, just in terms of coming back from the hamate bone surgery. So we'll see. He got the splint off about a week ago. I know he's been doing a little bit here and there, but we'll see. I mean, they have a great opportunity to go up and play well, and you're going to need to, obviously the two biggest things during this bad stretch for them, pitching has been bad, and rightfully so. We can talk about it because they have been awful, but at the same time, defensively, they've been pathetic. And you gave up 14 unearned runs last weekend against Lamar. I don't care who you're playing. You're going to lose the series, let alone get swept if you give up that many unearned runs. So they were better on Tuesday night. Wichita State's actually not a just terrible team. They're 18-9, 5-1, the Americans. So,
but what they have done is kind of taken away the projection of them hosting.
Yeah. They were Baseball America had them hosting as a top 8 seed last week. That's probably a little bit overzealous just in terms of what this is going to be. But they had about a 2 seed down in the Dallas Baptist region today, which would be a really tough region with them. UC Santa Barbara, who's really good out on the West Coast, and ironically enough, Lamar, who just swept them. So Friday night they gave that game away. Saturday they kind of got their ass beat, and then Sunday they just got beat. So we'll see.
Eddie will be up in Stillwater.
I look forward to
that series. Stickball is going to be coming as well, and also we're going to have a practice report on YouTube. Brent Venables actually talked for 32 minutes yesterday. It was a bizarre evening inside the Everett Center. There was a couple of student reporters that had a fainting spell, which Eddie's no stranger to that. It happens.
We were standing there for 30 minutes with the camera.
And people are really in that scrum, like all the body heat that's just generating.
There's a better way to do it. That's all I'm going to say. There's a better way to do
plan,
this.
Folks. But no, it was scary last night. Thankfully, everybody was okay. But a lot more stuff to break down from Brent Venables on the YouTube practice report. Also, note, hi Josh. I just feel like we need to say hello since you're still here. You survived the basketball and stickball.
I'm watching Arsenal try to win the league, guys. You guys talk about whatever you want to. You're good.
But I have started transferring everything onto YouTube and YouTube Music. It's a week-long process because we have so many episodes. They only let you transfer like 100 a day. So keep checking YouTube Music. U40 will go up first, and then we'll get all the archives of the post-game podcast, and then we'll start working on Stickball and practice report and the recruiting report and family matters, the family business,
which was really good. If you didn't watch it last week with Toby, that was
it was
awesome.
fantastic. Yep. Yeah, if you haven't been watching that, go check it out. Great look, if you really what this is if you want to have more insight into just the athletic department in general and people in the athletic department, we had the director of softball operations on. We want to do more of that stuff is take you inside the athletic department and all the goings on that happen there. So go check it out, the family business. Just check out the YouTube page in general. It's also important to tell you, appreciate everybody signing up right now. A lot of new subscribers, $1 for a month. You've got the spring game coming up on April 20th, but just unprecedented access, and we've been able to give you unprecedented coverage here at Sooner Scoop, both on the website and podcast and YouTube. So go sign up if you appreciate the podcast. It's just $1. Really easy to do. Get the whole next month. They'll take you through the spring game. So that's going to do it for us. Appreciate it, Josh. Appreciate it, Eddie. Appreciate it, Bob. Appreciate it, George. I'm Kerry Murdoch. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast from Soonerscoop.com.